Hi there, I've recently come across this Sega GameGear, and today we're going to find out if it works, and if it doesn't work, if we can fix it. Welcome to the basement. So Sega released the GameGear in 1990 as an answer to Nintendo's unstoppable Game Boy. Nintendo had released the Game Boy in 1989 and it was a smash success, and Sega wanted some of that action.
Get portable. Get a GameGear Supersonic Sports Pack. A color portable GameGear, carrying case, and 2 hit games. Sonic 2, and the Majors Pro Baseball. Whoa, you even save $50. The GameGear Supersonic Sports Pack. You know who makes it.
Coffee? Tea?
When they developed the GameGear, they focused on one important difference. They gave it a color screen.
Attention consumers, certain portable gaming systems are being dressed up in order to distract the buyer from their ordinary one-color play. What could be next? Little flower print dresses? Black leather restraining devices? Fresh baked olive loaf? Don't be fooled. Get Sega GameGear. Basic black on the outside. Hundreds of exciting full-color games radiating from the inside. And we promise no sleazy little get-ups that scream, "Hello, big boy. Get GameGear."
Now the color screen was great and really set it apart from Nintendo's Game Boy, but it came at a large cost: battery life. The GameGear would struggle to get 3 hours on 6 AA batteries, with that backlit color screen just taking up all of that power. Nevertheless, Sega went on to sell around about 11 million units of the GameGear, which sounds pretty good, but not so when you compare it to the Game Boy's over 100 million units sold. Now, as far as the design of the GameGear goes, Sega just based it off of their existing Master System. And they just shrunk everything down, added a color screen, and made it run off batteries. So even the games are cross-compatible with the correct adapter. And that saved them a lot of development time and cost to rush this thing to market to compete against Nintendo's Game Boy. So why don't we take a closer look at this particular GameGear right after I tell you about the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay is the best place for you to go and get all of your PCB needs met. They offer a range of different PCBs, a range of colors, very high quality, and they also offer CNC machining, and they do 3D printing as well. It really is a one-stop shop for you to meet all of your prototyping needs. Or if you're a hobbyist, it's a great place to see that project come to life. So feel free to check out PCBWay, kind sponsor of today's video. Let's have a look at this GameGear. Now this particular GameGear, which was donated to the channel by Christy, hi Christy if you're watching, looks like it has been well loved. It's a little bit scuffed over on these edges here, and if we have a look at the screen, we can see sort of general wear and tear scratches on the screen. Now I know you can get these replaced, these plastic screens, but before I order one of those, I want to see if this machine works, or if it doesn't work, whether we can get it working before I spend too much money on it. Now I can also see on the back we've got our 2 battery bays, and if we open them up we can see that's where our 6 AA batteries would go. So they're certainly a power hungry little unit. Now fortunately for me, I actually have a Sega power adapter. Right, so here's our power. Let's hook it up. And this unit actually came with a game as well called Chuck Rock, so I'll throw that in. And let's turn it on and see what happens. Okay, so not a lot is happening, but 2 things I've noticed straight away is we've got a power light and the backlight is working on the screen. There's no image or anything, but the fact that we've got a power light and the backlight is working is actually good news. So I am pretty happy with that. The thing with these GameGears is that there's very few left running on the original capacitors. By this stage in their life, virtually all of them have either had their capacitors replaced or aren't working. So it's a very common issue for these particular machines. So knowing that these have that capacitor problem, I went ahead and ordered a capacitor kit for this particular machine. So why don't we get rid of the power and start trying to pull this thing apart and see what's inside. And with all the screws removed, let's remove the back of the case. Right, so when you're lifting the back of the case off, you've got these 3 leads to unplug, so lift it from the bottom up. But now that we're in, we can see all the capacitors that we're going to need to replace. So the first step of this operation is we have some through-hole electrolytic capacitors that are going to replace these 3 here in the power board. So that's going to be the first step for us. And the other capacitors will be these plastic square ones, which are actually also electrolytic capacitors, but they're just laid on their side and they're in this plastic package. So we've got these tantalum capacitors to replace them with, surface mount. Now this is going to be my first go at ever doing any surface mount soldering, so if you're a soldering purist, maybe you need to find another video because you might not enjoy watching me attempt to do this. But you know, there's one way to learn, and we're going to learn on this GameGear, so we'll tackle it today. Now just zooming right in on these 2 capacitors here, you can see that that's looking a little bit crusty there. So these have definitely leaked, these ones. Hopefully they haven't caused too much damage to the pads and the board, but we'll only find out when we remove them. So let's get started. Right, so that's our power board free. Let's desolder these 3 capacitors and put the new ones in. Well, that's the power board done. Too easy. So for this main board, there's actually 9 capacitors, and that all these electrolytic ones here to over here as well. I've undone all the screws from this board, so I'm hoping it just comes out quite easy. And the screen's still attached, so we'll just have to be careful pulling it out. There we go. So most of these replacements will be fairly straightforward. I'm just going to clip the legs and try and pry them off. So that one broke away after I just cut one leg off, so you can see it's already corroded right through. Certainly a few crusty boys under there. I've gone through and cleaned up all the pads, and you can see these ones here, they're nice and shiny, they're ready to receive the new capacitors. It all went pretty straightforward except for this one here. You can see these pads are sort of dull and black, and they just completely eaten away. That was the capacitor that fell off. I only had one leg still attached, and just the leaky capacitor juice has just dissolved all of the metal here. So my plan is you can see that this pad had a trace that ran around the side here, and this pad was on this fat trace coming this way here. So I've scraped a bit of the covering off these copper traces, and I'm going to put the capacitor in this way to bridge those 2, and hopefully that works. But because I've never done surface mount soldering before, I'm going to start over here on this easy side and just get used to it before I tackle the harder spots. Okay, the first test is how do I get them out of these little plastic packages. Okay, now I see the back of these things is sticky tape, so that makes it easier to get them out. The things you learn as you go. Okay, so in theory, I just solder one side and then the other. How hard can it be? Yeah, I think that's worked. Okay, good job. They seem to be on there. Right, everything's been going pretty well okay. I've got all these new ones on. These tiny little ones were, well, tiny. I'm now down to the last one, which is the one that has no pads left. So I'm hoping to bridge across from there to there. I've tinned up the exposed copper, and let's see if the capacitor will bridge it. It just sort of bridges it. So I'm gonna have a crack at getting it on there. that might have worked. There's only one way to find out, I suppose. We'll plug in the power and see if we get something on the screen. Right, I've just roughly put it back together. I've applied the power, I've put in the game, so let's power it on and see if it's working. Well, we're getting a Sega logo, but there's certainly something wrong with the screen. I don't know if you can see that. It's got all these lines on it. But the game is running. I can see the game running there. But yeah, there's definitely something wrong with that screen. I noticed also when we were running that game there was no sound, so we've yet to recap the soundboard. So I'll pull it out of here and we'll get that recapped with those same tiny little surface mounts. Another case of the crusties under here. Okay, I've got the soundboard back together, back into the housing. I'll put it back together enough to turn it on again and we'll see if we've got sound before we tackle that screen. And power on. Hey! So we've got sound. The screen is still has all those lines on it. So the next step is now to try and figure out how to fix this screen. I think it might be something to do with this cable, so I might try reflowing the solder points underneath this adhesive sticker here and either break it further or maybe fix it. We'll find out. Now, I'm not entirely sure how to fix this, but there's some people online who are saying it's the connection of this ribbon cable to the LCD, and if I put a little bit of heat, I've just got really low heat at the moment. If I run a bit of heat across there, you can see the lines are sort of coming and going. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. You can see the lines sort of appear and disappear. So I'm just going to keep going until they're all gone, which is soon. I think I've got it. So it's definitely these three chips. It's nothing to do with this ribbon connection at all. It's these three chips and they need to be pushed up from the back. Look, it's coming back again. It's very fragile and the lines are just going to come back over time. As you can see, these ones have come back just while I've been talking. So I'm not confident that the screen is any good anymore. Yeah, look at that. And the whole, this is not going to work. I think we're going to need a replacement screen. Right, through the magic of video, it's now a week later and we have a BennVenn IPS LCD kit for the GameGear. So there's the screen. It comes with a new panel, which would be good to replace the scratched up one that we have. It's got a 3D printed mounting bracket, which will be good, and these easy solder, what are they, like PCB things. Now I looked at the install instructions on the BennVenn website and it doesn't actually have any instructions how to install these. So these must be quite new to the kit and hopefully we don't get too lost and confused trying to get these in there. So let's get going. So that is destined for the rubbish bin. It's not a very good quality screen anyway, so the IPS LCD is going to be a much better upgrade. So yeah. So the next step is to desolder this backlight and get rid of this old tube. Another thing to chuck in the bin. Okay, I've got it screwed onto the board. It wasn't the easiest thing because the 3D printed bracket was kind of flimsy and the holes weren't really the right size for these screws, but I've persevered and it seems to be on there now. So the next step is, I think, to get that ribbon cable on. On the instructions it actually has wires and stuff for soldering onto here. It doesn't have anything about this ribbon cable that I've got, so presumably these just replace all the wires that you would otherwise put on there. So work out where this goes and then we'll try and solder it on. I've got everything soldered on the back of the LCD. I think this extra one goes to the other side to M16 here. So I think I've done that correctly and I've got the ribbon done and up to these 2 points here. So as far as I know, it's all soldered correctly. The little clock down in here is done and this T10 one is done as well. So what I'm going to do now is connect the power and see if the screen comes on, and then at least we know we are on the right track. Okay, moment of truth. Ah, yes, I thought it wasn't working for a second, but I had the brightness all the way down. So yeah, look at that. That looks really clear and really crisp. I reckon we can start putting this back together and we're going to have a fully working Game Gear. Right, let's do that now. And the last piece of the puzzle, the new screen protector. Looks really good. And let me just turn that down a bit. Looks super clear, really bright. Great view angle. So before, as soon as you went off axis, you couldn't really see what was going on. So I'm super happy with that. That's going to be a really, really nice screen to play on. Let's start a game. So there we have it, all back together, and it's working great. So I'm really pleased with that. It was pretty nerve-wracking putting that screen in, but I must have done something right because it's looking great and working fine. So we've got the sound working, we've got all those capacitors replaced. It's the first time I've actually done any kind of surface mount soldering, so I'm pretty happy actually that we've got this one done and working, and it's not trash and ending up having to go in the garbage. So that is a bonus. But for now, I'm really happy with this Game Gear. It's going to be an excellent addition to the basement, which is where you've been today. Have a great day.